everybody, Mr. The Fanboy here. This is this is the first part in a 5 video series of my WrestleMania review series. I was initially gonna do all of these WrestleManias individually, but I don't feel like talking about each WrestleMania in detail individually, so I decided to combine my WrestleMania review series, split them up into certain eras of WrestleMania. And as you can see by the title here, I'm going to start off with my favorite era under WWE under Vince McMahon. My favorite era under Vince McMahon, my number one favorite era is the WWF or WWE New Generation era featuring Bret Hart, Shawn Owen, British Bulldog, Razor Ramon, 1, 2, 3 Kid, and many more, which of course lasted from, most people say 94, but for me 1993 all the way up until 1996. Okay, and of course 1997 will be the beginnings of the Attitude era. So yeah, this era right here, and the late 80s, early 90s portion of the Hulkamania rock and wrestling era are my favorite era, are my number one favorite eras of wrestling under Vince McMahon. My favorite era of wrestling for WWE was before Vince McMahon took over, with Bruno Sammartino, Bob Backlund, Ivan Koloff, and those people. And that was my favorite era of WWE before Vince McMahon Jr. took over. And in my opinion, while he took wrestling to big heights, killed the credibility of professional wrestling. But that's another video for another day. So right now I'm gonna start off with the New Generation era, and so that will be WrestleMania's 9 all the way to 12. I'll be talking about WrestleMania's 9 all the way to 12. The WrestleMania 9 through 12 have to be my all-time favorite WrestleManias. Yes, even 9 and 11, which have a mixed reception. Some people like these shows. A lot of people can't stand these shows. I'm gonna start off with WrestleMania 9. I love WrestleMania 9. I love the venue, Caesar's Palace. I love the late Gorilla Monsoon, Jim Ross, and Bobby the Brain Heenan, and Vince McMahon wearing togas, and Bobby the Brain Heenan coming in, riding a camel. Macho Man on commentary, which, yeah, that's kind of stupid, but I've always loved Macho Man on commentary. Yeah, he should be in the ring, but I love Macho Man on commentary, and I like how this WrestleMania, just like the WrestleMania before it, WrestleMania 8, which I'll talk about in another video series. I like how this WrestleMania focused on the young stars, but also featured stars from the previous era, um the rockin' wrestling era. Before I continue, everyone hates this WrestleMania because of my opinion. You had a strong card and a lot of good matches, but everyone hates this card because Hulk Hogan, who was initially booked in a tag team match with Brutus the Barber Beefcake versus Erwin R. Shyster and Ted DiBiase Jr. At the end of the show, um, interjected himself into the main event of Bret Hart and Yokozuna, and won the WWF championship. When I think Bret Hart, I think he was supposed to win the championship. He was supposed to retain the championship here. I think Yokozuna was supposed to win the championship here, and I think Bret Hart was going to win it back from him at King of the Ring, or Hogan would win it from Yokozuna at King of the Ring, and I think Hogan would drop it to Bret at SummerSlam '93 of that year. But of course that didn't happen. But that's the reason a lot of people hate this show. But I for one thought this show was cool. Love the venue, And this whole show is everything WrestleMania should be, and I think it's one of the best and most underrated WrestleManias of all time. So many awesome matches. You had a phenomenal opener, Intercontinental Championship match between Shawn Michaels and Tatanka, who was awesome during this period. Shawn Michaels and Tatanka, they had an 18-minute wrestling clinic, man. Wrestling clinic. The weakest match of the night. This wasn't the worst, but this was definitely the one of the weaker matches on the card, and that was the Steiner brothers taking on the Head Shrinkers. I never liked the Steiner brothers in their WWE run with with their early gimmicks, which was of course them being from Michigan, coming out in the amateur wrestling Letterman jackets. They didn't fit in with, in my opinion, with the gimmick heavy WWE, man. They were always better in Jim Crockett and in places like WCW, CW, but this wasn't solid WrestleMania match. It's the weakest on the card, in my opinion. Then of course, you had Razor Ramon defeating Bob Backlund in a pretty good squash match. For a squash match, for a 3 minute squash match, this was pretty good, and it was actually competitive. Razor Ramon made Backlund look strong. You don't like squash matches, but this one right here was a good one. Then of course, um, then of course, oh yes, next another favorite match of the night. You had the late Doink the Clown taking on the late Brian Adams, aka Crush. Yeah, both of these guys are no longer with us. I thought this was right here. I thought this was right here a good match. This is one of Doink's better matches in WWE. I usually can't stand watching Doink the Clown wrestle because, especially as a babyface, he's much better as a heel. But as a babyface, I can't stand watching him because all he does is pranks and other various other hijinks in the match. Various other hijinks in the match. This match right here and a match later he had later that year with Bret Hart are the most competitive, entertaining matches he's ever had. You had Crush beating up and controlling most of the match, Then you had Doink coming in with a second Doink coming in and Doink hit and the other Doink hit Crush with a foreign object, allowing Matt Osborne, I think that's his name, Matt Bourne, the original Doink the Clown, to get the 1, 2, 3. Then of course, yeah, I mentioned Razor Ramon defeating Bob Backlund in a pretty good squash match. Then of course you had Money Inc. Ted DiBiase and Earnhardt Shyster defending the tag team championships against the Mega Maniacs of Hulk Hogan and Brutus the Barber Beefcake. I'm a huge fan of Hulk Hogan and Brutus the Barber Beefcake. I love that tag team more than the Mega Powers, which is Hulk Hogan and Macho Man. I like Hulk Hogan and Macho Man as rivals and enemies more so than I do as friends in WWE. They were awesome as friends in WCW, but I always prefer them as rivals, and I prefer Brutus the Barber Beefcake as Hogan's ideal tag team partners, and they should have won the tag team championships. They should have won the tag team championships here. Got to go back over and watch this show again, but the Mega Maniacs won when Hulk Hogan, when Brutus the Barber Beefcake, I can't remember which one, but one of them accidentally struck the referee and got, or used a foreign object and got disqualified, allowing Money Inc. to retain the titles. After the match, Hogan emptied the briefcase and threw the money into the audience. Then of course you got oh yes, another awesome match. You have the narcissist Lex Luger defeating Mr. Perfect in a phenomenal and another wrestling clinic. This is and we're gonna talk about Lex Luger for a moment because a lot of people don't like Lex Luger, but I was a huge fan and still am. I was a huge fan of Lex Luger back in the day for not only being one of the strongest guys in wrestling, but being while not being the best technical wrestler, being a superb athlete, and a phenomenal fighter. Every punch and every move he did looked powerful, and was just such a phenomenal performer. Man, and I love his various characters. Also, an awesome character. He has several awesome characters. He had the narcissist. He had the heel character, the heel and baby, the stereotypical heel and babyface character in early in NWA Jim Crockett in early WCW. He had the narcissist gimmick where he would pose in front of the mirrors, which I thought was pretty cool. Then he turned face and became the Lex Express, where he tried to make him the next Hulk Hogan, which I thought was awesome. But more people prefer Bret Hart. The more fans prefer Bret Hart, even though I think Lex Luger would have been a much better draw than Bret Hart, and he was awesome as the what's name. I also liked it later when he teamed up with Bulldog and formed the Allied Powers, and they combined Lex Luger's theme with British Bulldog's British theme, which I thought was pretty cool. Then he went back to WCW, and he went back to WCW as a tweener, as a heel and a tweener. He was teamed up with babyface Sting, but displayed heel tactics such as cheating behind Sting's back. Then when the NWO came, he was once again a top babyface. Then when the entire NWO stable got back together, he was a heel again. Then he later then he later then he later became then he later I think became a tweener. Then in late '99 he became the total package, another gimmick where he come out in sweatpants, a sleeveless shirt, and would once again pose and have the late Miss Elizabeth rip off his pants and shirt before the match, before finally in the final days going back to Lex Luger. And I loved his finishers, the forearm and the torture rack. But yeah, and Mr. Perfect, well, not much to say about him. One of the best or the most underrated professional wrestlers of all time, Mr. Perfect. And this right here was a phenomenal. This right here was a phenomenal match. Lex Luger won by pulling Mr. Perfect's tights, then hitting Perfect with a forearm after the match. This was right after Mr. Perfect had just recently turned face over Ric Flair. The Undertaker defeated Giant Gonzalez, and much to my surprise, and a surprisingly good match. After watching this match, yeah, a lot of people don't like this match, but I don't know what they were expecting from these two guys in the ring. You have both of these guys, Undertaker and Giant Gonzalez. Neither one of these guys are really all that good, so this was a stereotypical big man brawl match. I don't know what people were expecting with this match. It was good for what it was. Yokozuna defeated Bret Hart, in my opinion, in an awesome WWF Championship match. Bret Hart, in my opinion, led Yokozuna to some of his most awesome matches, and this was a phenomenal story. Yeah, Bret Hart, the underdog, doing everything in his power to stop the massive Yokozuna, and came close to doing it. With the sharpshooter, but Mr. Fuji threw some powder in his eyes, allowing Yokozuna to pin Bret Hart and retain his championship. Then I loved the end, which I'm gonna talk more about that in a minute. I love the end where after it was over, Hulk Hogan came out to check on his kayfabe buddy Bret Hart, and he's trying to tend to Bret Hart, who is still covering his eyes from the powder that was thrown in his eyes. Bret Hart tells him Bret Hart tells him no. Bret Hart tells him no, Hogan, go for it. And Mr. Fuji foolishly challenges Hulk Hogan to wrestle a worn out Yokozuna for the WWE Championships and calls him a coward. Hulk Hogan accepts, and after Fuji beats on Hogan, Hogan comes back with a after Fuji beats on Hogan, after Yokozuna beats on Hogan, Yokozuna holds Hogan while Fuji pulls out some more powder. Hogan ducks and Fuji hits Yokozuna, and Hogan clotheslines Yokozuna and hits him with the leg drop to win his last WWF Championship in WWE. The story behind this was of course, Yokozuna, Hulk Hogan, he didn't want to drop the title he apparently didn't want to drop the title to Bret Hart, or Vince McMahon didn't see Bret Hart as a top draw yet. So he had Hogan defeat Yokozuna here. Hogan defeat Yokozuna here, which this is why Bret Hart hates Hogan. One of the main reasons Bret Hart hates Hogan. Then Bret Hart then of course Yokozuna would end Hulkamania at King of the Ring, and Bret Hart would and Bret Hart would get his win 1 year later at WrestleMania 10. But the original idea was, I think Yokozuna was supposed to retain the belt here, was supposed to win the championship here. Then Hogan was going to defeat Yokozuna at King of the Ring, and then Hogan was going to drop the title at Bret Hart at SummerSlam of that year for the championship. But Hogan didn't want Hogan didn't but apparently Hogan didn't want that. He didn't want to lose to a smaller guy, or Vince didn't see him as a draw. I don't know the actual story, but this is interesting because as a child, I watched this WrestleMania on VHS so many times as a child, and it was amazing seeing it here again on Daily Motion, um Daily Motion here on YouTube. Someone was nice enough to upload it in small frame form here on YouTube. But I remember as a child hating Yokozuna for defeating Bret Hart, and I thought it was it was heroic seeing Hogan come to check on his buddy, and Hogan winning the championship for the last time, and then Yokozuna ending Hulkamania at King of the Ring, ending it in WWE. And as a child, I still believed it, even though he only ended Hulkamania in WWE. This is before Hogan left for WCW. And this period right here, Hulk Hogan, the the late '80s, the early '90s and mid '90s WCW Hulk Hogan were my favorite forms of Hulk Hogan here in the states, because this is when his steroids were starting to wear off. So he had to increase his work rate and wrestle more in matches. Of course, this didn't work because he still got booed and was later forced to turn heel. But I always loved Hogan during this period when his steroids were off and he looked more like an ordinary guy and had to work more like a wrestler instead of just punching, big boot and leg drop and a slam. The formulatic Hogan match. He still had the same matches, but he increased his work rate. You never saw it in the States unless he was wrestling in a territory or somewhere in Japan, in New Japan. So yeah, WrestleMania 9 I think is an underrated WrestleMania. I can't remember everything from this show, so I'm gonna go back and rewatch later and do an individual review of this show. But what a phenomenal show. Next we got WrestleMania 10, widely considered to be one of the best WrestleManias of all time, man. One of the WrestleManias of all time, and it is one of the best WrestleManias of all time. An awesome card with the exception of two matches. What a phenomenal WrestleMania. You started the show off with Owen Hart versus Bret Hart. What a phenomenal show. Now, this match, in my opinion, hasn't held up the best. Too many obvious fake punches in this fight, but what a wrestling clinic these two put on. I thought these two had a better match at SummerSlam later that year, but what a phenomenal match. And the storyline of the match still holds up. With Owen being and this was one of the best storylines during this period. The brother versus brother feud, which was edgy for the PG New Generation family friendly New Generation era. What a phenomenal back and forth match. Owen Hart nearly wins with a roll up, much to the anger of Bret Hart. And I love how this storyline started. It pretty much started at Survivor Series '93. A couple of months before, several months before this WrestleMania, where Owen Hart was the only Hart to be eliminated in in the Survivor Series match between the Hart brothers and Shawn Michaels and his Knights. Shawn Michaels and his Knights, and Owen Hart was the only one eliminated. Then you see them fail to win the tag team titles at the Royal Rumble, and this is when Bret Hart turns on Bret Hart by kicking him in the leg and debuting his infamous promo, "I'm gonna kick you in the leg," and despite botching it, despite botching it, it still came off as badass. And Owen Hart the Rocket was so the late Owen Hart the Rocket was so awesome during this period. As soon as this era was over, I wish Owen would have left for WCW with Bret Hart. He didn't belong in the Attitude Era, in my opinion, and everyone knows what happened next with the Blue Blazer, so I don't have to talk about that now. Next was Bam and Bigelow and the late Bam and Bigelow and late Luna Vachon taking on the late Doink the Clown and Dink the Clown in a mixed tag team match. For a mixed tag team match involving a woman and a midget, this was right here. This was surprisingly a pretty good match. I usually hate matches like this. They do them all the time in Mexico, but in America, I can't stand matches like this. But this was a phenomenal. This was a phenomenal match. Bama Bigelow defeat. I think Bama Bigelow wins when he hits the headbutt on Doink the Clown for the 1-2-3. Next is oh yes, in an underrated match, Randy Savage defeated Crush in a Falls Count Anywhere match. Pretty much a hardcore match in this era, in this new generation era. Alundra Blaze defeated Lalana Kai in a quick match for the WWF Women's Championship. Have no rating, nothing to talk about here. Wasn't much of a match. Alundra Blaze destroyed Lalana Kai, and then of course you got underrated tag team Men on a Mission, the late Mabel and Mo taking on the Quebecers Jacques Rogu and Pierre for the WWF Tag Team Championships. Another underrated tag team match. The Quebecers, in my opinion, were an awesome tag team. I especially like Jack was by himself as the Mountie. I thought that was a cool gimmick. And you got Men on a Mission, who these guys were ahead of their times. These guys were wearing street attire. In the colorful comic booky New Generation era. Next is Yokozuna defeating Lex Luger by disqualification in a phenomenal championship match with Mr. Perfect as the referee. Mr. Perfect disqualifies Lex Luger for putting his hands on him, turning heel. In the process, and allowing Yokozuna to retain for the main event later. Earthquake defeated Adam Bomb in a quick squash match in what was the worst match of the night. Nobody remembers this match. I always forget about this match every time I watch this show. And Adam Bomb's a pretty good wrestler. Adam Bomb and Earthquake are two pretty good wrestlers. You could have had a pretty good wrestling match here, but no, you still have a throwaway squash match. You have Razor Ramon defeating Shawn Michaels in a revolutionary ladder match for the Undisputed Intercontinental Championship, which ended with Michaels being caught in the ropes. But several awesome spots, such as Michaels doing a double axe handle. What's his name? Michaels jumping off the top rope and knocking Razor Ramon off with a double axe handle. Then Michaels doing the signature splash. If you rent or bought the VHS version or the DVD of this, you see Michaels on the back, the signature splash off the ladder onto Razor Ramon. Then another spot where Michaels comes down with the ladder, falls with the ladder onto Razor Ramon. What a phenomenal ladder match, man. Then, of course, the main event, Bret Hart getting his revenge on Yokozuna by defeating him in a special in a singles match in a rematch from the previous year's WrestleMania with the late Rowdy Piper as the special guest referee. Match ends when Yokozuna falls and Bret Hart comes over there and pins him. Like I said, Yokozuna and Bret Hart matches. I'm a huge fan of those matches. Bret Hart led Yokozuna to some of his best matches ever. Next is the infamous WrestleMania 11, which this is another show. This is another underrated wrestling show. I happen to like. This show has a mixed reception. A lot of people hate this show for the weak card, the abundance of celebrity involvement, and last but not least, Lawrence Taylor and Bam Bigelow main eventing WrestleMania, and of course Lawrence Taylor defeating the late great Bam Bam Bigelow, defeating the late great Bam Bam Bigelow. I for one am a huge fan of this show. First off, for the first time in a while, I usually hate celebrity involvement in wrestling. It has been done right. Several companies have done it right, but I usually hate celebrity involvement in wrestling. But this is not one of them because first of all, WCW was kicking WWE's butt at this time. And if it wasn't for this show, they would probably be out of business. So WWE needed all the celebrities they needed, all the celebrity involvement they could have. On the show. This is one of the many times I actually give respect to Vince McMahon. One of the many times that guy actually did something right. Right. Vince McMahon, in my opinion, is a survivor and a good businessman. He is not a genius, which I'll talk about that in another video. He is not in any stretch of the imagination a genius, but this is one of the many times he did something right. One of the many good things he actually did right. He got as much celebrity involvement as possible. He had Pamela Anderson. He had Jonathan Taylor, the guy from Home Improvement. Several other people. He had Salt and Pepper performing Lawrence Taylor to the ring. He had Lawrence Taylor and the entire 1995 Giants team. He had NFL football player and WCW wrestler and announcer Michael McMongo, who was a terrible wrestler, but I thought he was an awesome personality in WCW, making his debut at this show. And the entire 1995 Giants, 1994 or 5 Giants roster team there. And this show just felt like, despite obvious production issues, this show, unlike WrestleMania today, felt like a big must-see epic show, and that's what WrestleMania doesn't have that anymore. It's just a major expensive big budgeted indie show or a big budgeted Raw and SmackDown Super show. That's what it is now. Then it's forgettable nowadays. I still remember this. I'll never forget what I saw this night. Like I said, and for having such a weak card, all the wrestling on this show was for the most part pretty good. You had an awesome opener with Lex Luger and British Bulldog, the Allied Powers, defeating the Blue Brothers, who of course were Ron and Don Harris, the Harris brothers. I did not know that as a child. That was Ron and Don Harris, the Harris brothers. Then of course you had oh yes, Razor Ramon with 1-2-3 Kid defeating Jeff Jarrett in a phenomenal Intercontinental championship match, and the crowd was hugely into this. They were rowdy for Razor Ramon and 1-2-3 Kid. That's another thing I loved about this show. The crowd was for the most part into everything on this show for what was supposed to be a terrible show. Then of course you had The Undertaker defeating King Kong Bundy in a pretty good big man match. Everyone hates this match because your Undertaker defeated Bundy with a clothesline. Once again, what do you expect from these two wrestlers in the ring? Neither of these two wrestlers are that good. And like I said, I've never really seen an Undertaker match. I've never really seen a super awesome Undertaker match unless he was wrestling Kurt Angle or Ken Shamrock, or Chris Benoit, like a technical wrestler, or any match involving a cage or weapons is the only good matches I've seen Taker in. Owen Hart and Yokozuna with Mr. Fuji and Jim Cornette defeating the Smoking Guns, Billy and Bart, for the WWF Tag Team Championship. Another phenomenal match. And first off, the crowd, despite Owen Hart and Yokozuna being the heels in this match, they were rowdy. They were rowdy for Owen Hart, and they were heavily behind Owen Hart and Yokozuna. And they popped when Owen Hart and Yokozuna defeated Smoking Guns for the Tag Team Championships. And even watching this as a kid, watching the heels, Owen Hart, become the Tag Team Champions was an awesome moment. The end of the match where Owen Hart pins Billy and Bart, and you see Owen Hart jumping up and down. We won the belts. He won the belts. Yeah. Bret Hart defeated Bob Backlund in a pretty good I Quit match. In my opinion, they had a much better match at Survivor Series a couple of months before this, but this was a pretty good match. Bret Hart doesn't like this match. Then of course, Diesel defeating Bret Hart in Diesel defeating Shawn Michaels. Diesel was with Pamela Anderson, and Shawn Michaels was with Psycho Sid and Jenny McCartney for the WWF Championship. This right here was a pretty good match. This right here was an awesome match. Actually, this is one of Diesel's better matches in WWE. He would have another awesome match with Bret Hart later that year at Survivor Series, but another thing I didn't like about '95, another dumb thing, allowing Diesel to be World Heavyweight Champion. And this is why I didn't mind not only having so much celebrity involvement on the show, but having Lawrence Taylor and Bam Bigelow as the main event, because Diesel wasn't drawing squat as world champion. He's actually one of the worst world champions of all time. Kevin Nash in WCW from '96 to 2001 was awesome, but in WWF '95, he was terrible. Man, he was terrible. He was an awesome character, but so many terrible matches, and was one of the worst champions of all time. Couldn't think of it. Whenever I watch WWF '95, I usually always skip most of his matches unless it's this match or the one from later that year with Bret Hart at Survivor Series later that year. His matches are terrible. Every time I go to '95, I always watch the mid card matches, the mid and undercard matches, because his matches are absolutely terrible, man. So, and this is why I usually hate celebrity involvement, but this is the only time I don't hate it, because it was needed this time. You needed a big name like Lawrence Taylor and the entire 1994-1995 Giants team taking on Bam Bigelow in the main event, and what a phenomenal match it was. Lawrence Taylor performed well. Bam Bigelow made him look strong. To this day, this WrestleMania was 22 years ago. I am still mixed about having LT go over Bam Bigelow. While yes, the story makes sense, Bam Bigelow didn't take LT seriously. And that's why LT he underestimated him, and LT triumphed and beat him. But LT beating Bam Bigelow does make wrestling look bad, look fake. So I can see where people are talking about. But this right here is a phenomenal WrestleMania. I'm gonna rewatch and also re-review this awesome WrestleMania, because I feel it gets a lot of unneeded hate. Now the next WrestleMania. Oh yes, this is the final WrestleMania of the new generation era, and that is WrestleMania 12. WrestleMania 12. What a phenomenal show. Despite the weak card, yeah, lots of good matches and lots of good matches and moments, and a phenomenal main event for the WWF championship, between Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart, wrestling in a 60-minute Ironman match, a 60-minute wrestling clinic between these two. That's hard to believe in WWE, especially in this era. But this is one of the only times Vince McMahon ever did something good. He gave the title back to Bret Hart. He gave the title back to Bret Hart, and had him and Shawn Michaels show why they're two of the best WWE superstars of all time, wrestling in a 60-minute clinic for the WWF championship. Like I said, this was a phenomenal show. Love the Bret Hart Shawn Michaels feud. I think this right here is the match where Bret Hart started to hate Shawn Michaels, and people, these two guys feud right here made me believe that wrestling was real, man. So did Bret Hart's feud with Austin later on. These two guys made me believe wrestling was real. As much as I love the Austin and Rock feud, one of the greatest feuds of all time, I always knew that could be fake, and that these two behind the scenes could be cool with each other, and that this is show from the way it looked. But these two right here made me believe that wrestling was real due to the real life animosity with each other. I like a lot of people love to compare Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart's feud with the in the rap game with the late Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls feud due to the reels and the animosity between the two wrestlers, which lasted for years up until WrestleMania 26, up until the one of the Raws before WrestleMania 26. But let's continue. Let's get with this show. Like I said, despite you had a weak card because you had to give so much time to the main event, but you still had a pretty good card and a phenomenal opener. You have Vader, Owen Hart, and the late British Bulldog taking on Ahmed Johnson, Jake the Snake Roberts, and Yokozuna. Phenomenal six-man tag team match. To start the show, Owen Hart, and British Bulldog won when Vader hit the Vader bomb on Jake the Snake Roberts. Love Jake the Snake Roberts during this period. Rowdy Piper defeated Goldust in a Hollywood Backlot Brawl match. Pretty much once again another hardcore match in this era, which started off in a fight in a parking lot, then this portion of the fight ended with Rowdy Piper with Goldust and Marlena leaving in a car and Rowdy Piper chasing him halfway across town. While that was happening, they moved on to the next match of the night, which was Stone Cold, the ringmaster, with Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million champion, taking on Savio Vega. Savio Vega in another phenomenal match. Not this match is not that memorable, but this was an awesome match. Stone Cold was an awesome heel, and Savio Vega was an awesome babyface in this match. Ultimate Warrior squashed Triple H in a quick match. Despite how much I don't like Ultimate Warrior, I hate Triple H more, and it is real good to see Triple H get squashed here. It's funny because Triple H will later become a much bigger star than Warrior ever was. Love seeing Triple H get squashed here. And this was after the curtain call incident, where the infamous incident where Michaels and Razor Ramon, the baby faces, where Michaels and Razor Ramon, the baby faces, celebrated with 1-2-3 Kid and Triple H, who of course I think by this point were heels. We're heels in the ring. Once again, making wrestling look fake, but wrestling was long exposed at this time. But and Triple H, he stayed behind and was punished for this. Undertaker defeated Diesel in a okay match. This is one of the weaker matches on the card, in my opinion. Like I said, I do not like Diesel's WWE run. He was much better in WCW. Then Shawn Michaels defeated Bret Hart in a phenomenal 60-minute match. I love how they started off with traditional train wrestling. Then they did several high-impact moves. Then the sudden death overtime. This is the first Iron Man match with no pinfalls. No one got any pinfalls. It's most pinfalls in 30 or 60 minutes. No one got any pinfalls. No one got any pinfalls, and the match went into sudden death overtime, where Shawn Michaels won with a desperation sweet chin music for the 1-2-3. You can see the anger on Bret Hart's face after it was over, and I still believe it even now. This match for a moment makes me forget that wrestling is fake, and I'm just embraced in the moment. Michaels achieving his boyhood dream and seeing the anger on Bret Hart's face, setting up the feud between the two, and setting up Bret Hart's heel turn, the frustrations and stuff. And this started listening. I think this is when Bret Hart instructed Michaels to get out the ring after when it was over, and this is why Bret Hart hates Shawn Michaels so much. But like I said, what a phenomenal WrestleMania. Well, this was the last of the new generation era. I consider WrestleMania 13, because this is to be the first official WrestleMania in the Attitude Era, because WrestleMania 13, while they still use the cool WrestleMania theme, I love the WrestleMania instrumental theme that Linda McMahon uses, and I love the lyrical theme they used for WrestleMania 9. I forgot to mention the awesome WrestleMania theme that was used during this period. But WrestleMania 13, while they still use that theme, WrestleMania 13 was a completely different WrestleMania from these four WrestleManias I just mentioned. Right here, I just mentioned right here. So that's why I'm gonna save that for my Attitude Era WrestleMania series. But like I said, what a phenomenal show, man. What a phenomenal show, and I still enjoy these today. But each of these shows were WrestleMania was supposed to be. I'm gonna rewatch and review these individually. Review these individually because these are some of my all-time favorite WrestleManias, and this was my all-time favorite period in WWE. All right, I'm done for now, people.